Hello and welcome to the Real Estate Nerds Podcast. On this Best Deal episode, we will explore the human side of real estate investing with a seasoned pro about the legendary best deal of their life. A deal isn't just the investment, it is also the person executing it. Stay with us and learn what it takes to be the best investor possible. And welcome to the Real Estate Nerds Podcast. I'm your host, Scott Smith, owner of Royal Legal Solutions. We are an asset protection law firm based out of Austin, Texas, helping people all over the country with the real estate asset protection. And today I am with Josh. We're going to be talking about Josh's best deal here today. So Josh, thanks for coming on the show. What do we need to learn about you today to help set us up for your story and your best deal?
Yeah, so I am a real estate investor. I have 15 different properties right now. I'm also a CPA. I have a CPA firm I founded called CPA on Fire. And yeah, I mean, I guess those kind of link together. I use the numbers I use as a CPA to kind of structure my real estate deals.
That's awesome, man. How long did it take you to get up to 15 properties?
Yeah, so we'll talk about this in my best deal, but I had 2 properties, and then I just did a deal about 6 months ago for 13 different properties. So
wow,
it
awesome.
jumped quickly.
Yeah, man. That's great. So I guess let's jump into the deal. What is that from like 10,000 feet up? What does that best deal look like?
Yeah, so I was actually just looking at a triplex, and you got to understand, I'm in the Midwest, like rural part of the Midwest. Properties are cheap. And I was looking at a triplex that was like $40,000. And another agent at the real estate agency I was working with said, "Hey, if you're interested in some investment properties, I have some. Are you interested in more than one?" I said, "What do you got?" So he ran me through it. He had about 20 different properties. And we kind of zeroed in on 13 I was interested in. And we ended up structuring it so that he would provide a little over 90% of the financing. So was able to get all 13 at once, have owner financing for 90% of it. And then I was able to get it at such a good price. I was pretty confident that I had a lot of equity in it that I just took out another loan for the other 10%. So got into the 13 properties with none of my actual money, which was nice.
Oh, it's awesome, man. It sounds like the great mix for a good deal. You got some owner financing, low down payment. Those are always great little fundamental factors in there.
Yeah.
So how does that, can you take us back to the genesis of this deal? Like, how do you even find that guy? How does that relationship even come about?
Yeah. So it's from my hometown. I grew up there. So it was someone that I knew growing up. He was friends with my parents. Like I said, he was an agent at the firm that was helping me try and buy this triplex. And he heard I was trying to buy that. So he reached out to me and said, "Hey, are you interested in more than that? I have more properties." And then we just kind of met up a few times and got to talking, and he made an offer out for me. I thought I could get it for significantly better. So we went back and forth a little bit and ended up structuring the deal that way.
Can you share with me about like how that seems like a pretty big trust factor that comes into meeting somebody like that, kind of just randomly reaching out to you. It's almost like a cold call in a way, right? Like, I know you're interested in this. Would you like even more?
Right.
How do you interpret that, like as an investor into that? Like what worked well for you in that scenario or not? You know what I mean? Because it could kind of throw me off, or probably a lot of the people off, to have somebody reach out to you like that. But if you would have gotten spooked just by that, you would have lost out on the best deal, right? So
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, it was quite a leap to go from looking at a triplex to someone offering you 20-something properties and eventually getting that down to 13. It definitely helped that I had somewhat of a relationship from the past with him. It wasn't just some random person coming out of nowhere. It'd probably been 10 years or more since I talked to him, so it was a little bit out of the blue. But by having that prior relationship helped. It's in my hometown, so I know the area well, so I could really look at the properties and know I could look at the street and know exactly where it was, if it was a good area, bad area. So I'd say being familiar with it was definitely a big part of it. My counter offer to him was about 100,000 less than he offered me. So I think having a little bit of a relationship with him made me, in some ways it made me more confident to make that. In some ways it made me more hesitant, because in some ways it's a little easier when you don't know someone to kind of lowball them on an offer. Whereas it's someone, you don't want to piss them off a little bit. So, and there's pluses and minuses to having a prior relationship with him, I would say.
How did you decide on like what the counter offer would be? Was it purely like fact-based? Like, this is the numbers, here's the way I run it. Like, is that your objective criteria that you use when you're negotiating that piece with them, or something else?
Yeah, so this this part I think was huge in getting this done. This is where my work as a CPA came in. I went into my second meeting with him. So it was 13 properties. He wanted me to pay like 460, and I came back I wanted to pay 330 is what it was. Okay, so I offered him 130,000 less, and I came in with this giant binder. I had every single property I wanted laid out. I went on to Bigger Pockets, ran the numbers on every single property. So this is what I anticipate cash flow being. I went and looked at every comparable property I could find, put it in this binder so that I could break it down by property and say, okay, you wanted 50,000 for this property. Here's why I think it's worth 34,000. We went back and forth, and by the time it was done, he really couldn't put up too much of an argument because of the research I had put in there. So he counter offered. I think his final was he wanted 341 instead of my offer of 330. And at that point, it was close enough that I said, "Yeah, let's do it. Let's go with it."
Okay, and in turn, so you end up negotiating the purchase price down with that. Yep. You did some research on Bigger Pockets as part of your due diligence, running the numbers.
Yep.
Big thick binder showing people that, hey, these are my bullets, basically, right? Like,
yep.
You can take this back to your investors and say, hey, this is actually what it's actually worth. So you arm him up with other tools that he can take back to help bully them down on the price, get them working for you in that way.
Right.
And then, so when you start looking at going forward in the deal itself, how does that process work? So you guys, went through the initial pieces of, getting the numbers straight. Then you guys break. And then when's the next time that you guys see each other? What's the next communication?
Yeah. And so these were his properties. So he didn't have to, it was his final call. So he didn't have to run by any other owners or anything.
Okay.
So the next piece was convincing him to do the owner financing on it and for a little less than 10% down. So I came into that meeting and basically structured it as, I kind of tried to take away every objection I thought he would have. So I brought my own tax return with me so I could say, look, I make this amount of income. I have income coming in. I printed out my credit score, said, here's my credit score. I tried to go into the meeting I tried to think, all right, what's he going to say when I present this? What's he going to say when I present this? And I tried to have a counter argument ready to go for everything that he would have. And it seemed to work pretty well. Like, for instance, before he could even object to the owner financing, I'm going to bring up, well, this is actually going to help you out on your taxes a little bit because you're not going to pay $340,000 in capital gains on capital gains on the $340,000 right from the start. You're going to spread it out over 5 years or 10 years or whatever we want. And then he'd say, well, and my proposal was I'll get these refinanced within 2 years, but I want to amortize over 10 years so my payment's not too high, right? So his argument back, I knew it was going to be, well, what if you don't get it refinanced in 2 years? So I had this laid out. So after 2 years, if I don't have it refinanced, I'm going to give you a $20,000 additional payment on principal, and the interest rate's going to go up. And if in 2 more years I don't have it paid off, the interest rate's going to go up again. So I think the key was I just went in there with every objection he could have. I had an answer for it. So by the time it was done, he could really say, you know what, I don't have anything else to say. This deal makes sense.
Did you have anybody else coaching you through that? I mean, because that's a pretty high level deal analysis of how to think through it, as well as feeling what to offer each piece of that.
I did that all myself. I've been involved in real estate for a while. My dad has 30 something properties that he's had for quite a while that I had a 30% ownership in, and I've kind of watched him do it for a while. So, but between that and the CPA work, I kind of just knew a little bit what to do and kind of flew by the seat of my pants for the rest of it.
Awesome. Okay. That's cool, Josh. It sounds like there's some different track record in there, right? Like you're saying flying by the seat of your pants, but it's like, no, I've been like a professional in this industry. I've watched somebody else like my dad do it. Those are pretty high actually learning tools that come into like knowing like what's going to feel right, look right into that. A lot of times I think somebody can be in your type of position that you're in. And if they don't have somebody else, if they don't have your level of education or experience and they don't have somebody else to mentor them through that deal, a lot of times they're just agreeing to stuff and they don't really know what they should be agreeing to or not because they're just excited to be in real estate.
Yeah,
do you ever see that as part of your profession where people end up with that kind of scenario?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, you see it all the time where, well, especially if you get a deal where you can get a bunch of properties and the owner is willing to provide financing and you just get so excited you accept anything, right? So no, yeah, for sure. Especially new investors, they're much more willing to accept bad terms instead of going back, looking at the deal, see what makes sense. I think the key is you have to be willing to walk away if it's not a bad deal. And that's how I went into that meeting. If he wasn't willing to take close to what I'm structuring out here, then it just wasn't going to happen. And I wasn't going to get these 13 properties, and that'd be okay.
Did you already have that written out? I mean, sometimes they refer to that as your BATNA, right? Of like, did you already like know exactly what that number was? I'm only going to accept things between this range and this range before I even walk into that meeting.
Yeah. So I knew I wasn't going to budge on the down payment. I wasn't going to budge on him financing 90% of it. And I was not going to go above 350 total price. And we ended up at 341. So.
Wow. That's awesome, man. So how does that work? So you guys agree on the price. What's the middle part of this deal? I mean, now there's a whole vetting process that actually happens that in between, agreeing on the price and actually closing, right?
Yeah. So that was where I struggled. I didn't know if I wanted to get like an inspector to inspect every house, to get an appraiser on every house. So I kind of settled on having my dad lives in Colorado. I'm in Ohio. I flew my dad out. He's been in this business forever. He owned a lumber yard forever. So he knows houses inside and out. So me and him just went through all 13 properties. Of course, you're getting properties. I mean, the average price of these properties was like $34,000, right? So you're not going to get a perfect property. But I just wanted to make sure that there were no major expenses that I was missing. We didn't have roofs about to collapse. We didn't have furnaces about to go out. So we went through all that. Then we had to, on the seller side, he was very interested in, he was concerned with if I stopped paying, what would happen, right? Would he have to foreclose on me? So we had to structure the deal. He went to his attorney, he went back and forth there to make sure that everything was structured properly there. But after all those I's were dotted and T's were crossed, it ended up being basically exactly what we agreed on.
How did you solve that problem with him worrying about needing to foreclose on you?
Yeah, so it was a lot of just the way the lawyer drew it up in the contract. It's almost structured like a land contract, so that he does not have to. He's not going to have to foreclose on me. Basically, the properties revert back to him if I miss a payment. We structured it where if I miss a payment, he has to send me a notice that gives me 14 days to catch up. If I do not catch up, he takes back all 13 properties immediately.
Oh, wow. So you gave him actually a huge piece of leverage.
Exactly. Yeah.
To be able to tell him, okay, that's your biggest problem. All right, I'm going to give you everything you could possibly want.
Yep, exactly. So yeah, I mean, that's any deal. I think you got to be either flexible on the terms of the price, right? Because you're not going to be able to get ideal terms and ideal price. Somewhere along the lines, you got to be flexible.
And of those two things of determining deal terms and price, where do you find that you get the most leverage in the deals that you work on? Is it actually being like better at negotiating the terms? Because most people it's really easy for them to understand price and they just get their feet in the ground, planted on it.
For sure. Yeah, no, I think most people are stuck on price. This guy he's very wealthy, smart guy. So he was able to budge more on the price and some of the terms were non-negotiable to him, like figuring out a way to easily take them back if I stop paying. But the majority of the time, I think if you tell people, you'll give them their price and they'll be very flexible on the terms.
Yeah. Well, I think that's I've noticed that too. I don't know if you have, but like it's the wealthier people that I work with that I do deals with that are much more interested in the terms because it's Absolutely. Like about how much of a pain in the ass this is going to create in my life. Exactly. I already have more money than I probably actually really have to have right now.
Yep.
But now you're going to cause a problem in my life. Now this is going to be something I don't want to deal with.
Yep. That's exactly right. Yeah. I mean, so in our area, there's no real property managers. So if you own properties, you're taking care of them yourself, right? So his biggest scenario was, I want to get out of managing these properties. Yes, $350,000 cash would be nice, but essentially that's going to do nothing for me. So how can you solve my problem of getting these properties out of my hands? And we kind of approach it from there.
Cool. And I think you doubly solved another problem too, is that he didn't have to think about reinvestment right away.
Exactly. Yeah.
You give him
taxes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So. That's the biggest. I got investors that are working out of Houston, for example, that'll end up buying properties out there and then, doing like a burst strategy with them where they buy them like all cash because these guys have just tons of amounts of cash that they need to use somewhere. So they buy all these properties cash. They'll like renovate all of them and then have like 40 houses that they end up going. And they're like, cool, I'm totally happy with a 7% cap rate. But if you told me that I could resell and flip these properties, I probably wouldn't do it because just the pain of having to think, where am I going to reinvest in something I know can be like safe and I don't have to think about it is like a huge problem. So yeah, there's definitely levels to that game. So tell me about the end of this deal. You end up closing on the properties, obviously. And how does that transition work with taking over, trying to manage those properties?
Yeah, so he'd done a surprisingly good job. I think when I bought them, 9 of the 13 were rented out already. He had really good renters in. They were paying on time, so there was no issues there. There were the 4 empty ones. The terms of the deal where he had to get them rent ready, so I could take them over and have them ready to rent. I would say his idea of rent ready was a little different than mine, so I ended up going in and putting more money than I expected, but not a huge amount. There was definitely a few hiccups. Like one of them, right the day I took over the property, the water line failed, and I had to pay $1,500 to get a water line fixed. Right, so definitely some unexpected things that came up, but for the most part, it went pretty smooth. He was very helpful. He wasn't like, okay, deal's done, they're all yours. I could ask him questions, say, hey, so and so said this, is that true, about tenants and things like that. And he's even to this day, I can still text him and ask him questions. So it's definitely helpful in that situation to have, I think, a seller that's willing to keep that relationship and answer questions and help you where he can.
Is there anything that tells you, I mean, aside from knowing the guy 10 years earlier and him reaching out, like, what are you looking for to be able to tell you that somebody has like that quality of character? You know, because that's really, like, that's fundamentally what happened here, right?
Yeah.
But you made a judgment call on who this guy was. You did a bunch of research in there, which is
Right.
smart into there, but there's a huge character piece in here. How did you determine that?
Yeah, I mean, I did get lucky because I knew him a little bit.
That's
I
10
don't.
years ago, man.
Right, right.
You're jumping back into a new person 10 years in the
Right.
game. You're making a new assessment, and there's something that happened in there. Whether
Sure.
I don't know if you're aware of it or not. You know, it might make somebody conscious.
No, absolutely. I think I think that's, you got to go to the meeting and something in you's either going to tell you can trust them or you can't. Right. And I think if you get that feeling that you can't, I don't think you should ignore it in a deal this big. Right. I mean, that's if the ongoing relationship is crucial to you and you got to put some trust factor in them, I think you got to trust whatever your instincts tell you there about that person.
And how many meetings did you actually have before you guys agreed to close?
Yeah, so we had the initial meeting where he made his offer on. So we had a couple phone calls back and forth, and I told him the 13 properties I was interested in, and then we had a meeting, and he said, "All right, here's the price I want for these 13 properties." So I took another 2 to 3 weeks, looked at everything, ran numbers, put that big binder together. We had another meeting, and at this point, he was kind of like, I said, "Hey, I want to have another meeting," and I remember his response was like, "Fine, but do you really think something's going to get done here? Because I don't want to waste my time if not." Because look, he's busy, right? So he didn't want me to waste his time. So I knew I had to go into that ready to show him something that could get the deal done. So we had that meeting. At that point, we went back and forth to get to that final 341 number. Within that meeting, we met for probably 2 hours. And then from there, it was kind of, I did my due diligence, he did his due diligence, and we had one final meeting to sign the paperwork and finalize everything. The 3 in-person meetings and a bunch of phone calls.
I got 6 meetings approximately, right?
6 meetings? In-person meetings, we had 3, but
yeah. But wouldn't you include phone calls?
Phone calls, yeah, I would say probably more than 6.
You could say like touch points, right? So it might be like 6 plus, right?
Yeah. Oh, easily. Yeah. I would guess 10 plus for sure.
Yeah. See, that's what's awesome, man. Because like that's one thing that we learned about like human psychology is actually the number of touch points we have with people is the higher our confidence levels get with that person.
For sure.
How we get to know them. That's why when you're going on dates, like it doesn't matter the duration of the date. It's actually how many dates do you have.
Right.
It actually matters than anything else. But the same thing happens to apply in business, right? It's like how comfortable do I feel with somebody, and how many different scenarios can I see them in? So that's really cool. I think I just want to underscore that as like what I thought was really neat about your story into this is, you know, creating lots of different touch points with people gave you like a really good scope of like, who is this guy? Because you interacted with them and in different scenarios that are going to show you different parts about his character. He can't always be a sales guy. He can't always be not 10 times.
Right.
Know,
no, exactly.
time, maybe 2 times.
Yeah.
You know,
that's a good point.
Right. Yeah. Like we have a hiring policy as part of Royal Legal Solutions that we never hire anybody until we at least have 3 meetings with them.
Yeah.
Because it's usually through at least 3 that somebody tells you like, here's actually all the things that are wrong with me. And then we get to say like, okay, cool. Right. No, actually those things are wrong with everybody. That's totally fine. Become part of the family. Here we go. Right. So neat as part of the, that to me, I would say that's probably, out of your story, Josh, I would say that's my lesson learned. From listening to your story here today, that it's like, you know, that the really important pieces is, you know, what's the frequency of the meetings? What's the number that I can get in with somebody to really determine what their character is?
Yep.
Before I shake off of that, what listening, thinking back on, all the things you talked about today, I know we talked about a lot of different topics, what would be something that you would underline to say, hey, if you only took this out of this scenario that happened with me, I think this would be a good walk away item?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing I took from it was how well it worked for me to be prepared, to have done my homework. Like at multiple times, I'd be showing him something and he'd be like, well, I'm impressed. You've done your homework here. So if you're going to deal with successful people, they don't want you to waste their time. If they're going to provide you financing, they want to know that you know what you're doing. So just going in there, even stuff as little as he'd start to say, well, I got the property taxes way down on these. You should go check them out. And I'd be like, well, I did. I saw that you got that one all the way down to $549, right? And he'd be like, wow, you did do your homework. So just little things like that would, to impress him and let him trust you. Because as much as I wanted to trust him, that's hugely important. If he's going to provide the financing, he's got to have a huge trust in me, right? So I think when you're dealing with successful people, who's mostly who you're going to deal with when you're buying property from people, well, it depends, but a lot of people, what you'll deal with is successful people, and they want to see that you know what you're doing, that you've done your homework.
When you're working on larger deals like you are with guys that are actually professionals, what they do is like part of the portfolio for sure, right? That's going to matter. But I think like in preparing the documentation and doing your research that you did, I think you showed him something that alleviated like a deep underlying concern of his, which is really just about like, if I give this guy the money, what am I going to have to deal with next? And it's like, well, he's that diligent on everything that he's doing at this end before he even gets into the deal, and this whole thing could blow up and it could be for nothing. Imagine how good this guy's going to be once he actually has his money in the deal. I don't need to worry about this. I can just move forward and get rid of this and get this thing off my plate. Boom. He's going to do that. That's an emotional decision at that point.
Exactly. Yep.
Did you know that like was his emotional state of being going into the negotiation, that's what he really wanted? Is he really wanted like this emotional burden off his plate? He just needed confidence that it was going to be off.
Yeah, no. And he was very upfront about that I just didn't want to get rid of these properties. They're a headache for me. Just not because they're problem tenants, just, I have tons of stuff going on. I don't need to deal with 13 tenants. Right. So yeah, I knew that the more I could appeal to, look, I'm going to get these off your plates. No, I'm not going to give you $460,000 cash like you originally wanted, but I'm going to take the headache away, and you can rely on that every month that payment's going to be in your mailbox, and you're never going to have to contact me about that.
Yeah, he didn't do the owner financing without all of the diligence.
Right.
Done,
exactly.
Right. To show that you're not going to let go down.
For sure.
That's really freaking cool, Josh. What an awesome story, man. Thanks for coming on the show today. If anybody wants to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah. So the easiest way is probably still on my CPA website, cpmfire.com. If they want to check out some of the properties that we've done, I have a real estate one that is BauerleEnterprises.com. They just kind of get a feel for what these properties look like that you can get for $34,000. But yeah, that's the best place to find me.
That's awesome, man. Well, of course, I'm Scott Royal Smith, the host of the Real Estate Nerds podcast. Today we had everybody, Josh, with us, his best deal, an awesome story in a lot of ways about the importance of preparation and really listening to people and getting them what they want down to the emotional core level in the deal, which is really how he's able to put together that big deal, in my opinion, that with the owner financing in such awesome terms. So thanks everybody for tuning in. Until then, be safe.